24 years, over 150 jury trials, I've never had a harder closing argument than this. Because honestly, in most, I've got evidence to attack. This case is totally speculation.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and this is Just Thought Lounge. JTL is the true crime channel that delivers serious, well-balanced coverage of the cases that really make you think. We're about to take a look at a case that had investigators questioning the meaning and authenticity of every piece of evidence they uncovered. What was real in this case, and what had been staged to lead them in the wrong direction. On the 24th of May 2020 in Westerville, Ohio, Emily Noble and her husband of 2 years, Matthew Moore, went out on the town to celebrate her 52nd birthday. After an enjoyable time out, they were seen returning home early that evening. Less than 24 hours later, however, Matt had called police to the home. His wife was missing. Her purse, car, ID, and phone all left behind, and Emily could not be found. Telling police that he had a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach and suspected the worst, Matt spent hours speaking with investigators. He pointed out potentially key evidence, guided them to areas to look for Emily, suggested what he thought or feared could have happened. After months of searching, evidence gathering, expert reports, and questioning, detectives were convinced they have seen through the act and they have pieced together the puzzle. There was more to the case than meets the eye, and more to Matthew Moore than a distraught husband. Or was there? Let's take a look. Friends of Emily Noble's, of which she had many, describe her as a big-hearted, slightly eccentric, and unfailingly loyal person. She embraced nature, loved going for walks, and had adopted a hobby of foraging and drying out plants, what most people would consider weeds, and using these as herbs in her kitchen or to replace the produce at her local grocery store. Emily was a lover of nature. Many of her friends said that they never expected the feisty and independently minded Emily to get married, but she did so twice. In around 2016, Emily joined the dating website Plenty of Fish and met Matthew Moore, a man that shared her self-described hippie-like lifestyle. Matt, once married himself, had made a career as a casino worker in Las Vegas for over 20 years, but he had relocated with his son, briefly at first, to Ohio where he had first met Emily. But after the program that his teenage son Joey was enrolled in ended, Matt made his way back to Vegas to work, leaving Emily devastated and heartbroken, according to those close to her. The separation did not take, however. Emily and Matt reconnected, leading Matt and Joey to move back to Ohio. In the summer of 2018, Emily and Matt Moore were married. They moved into Emily's condo, an inheritance from her mother, and looked after Joey, a teenager who required special care. Emily and Joey rapidly grew very close. There was a cloud that hung over Emily's 52nd birthday celebration with her husband on the 24th of May 2020. It had been a year of grief for the couple. 10 months prior, 18-year-old Joey, having recently been diagnosed with schizophrenia, had taken his own life. Devastated by the loss, Emily had taken a few months off at the Medicaid office where she worked. Matt also struggled with depression. For a time at least, they both just tried to cope. Even regular daily tasks became difficult to work through. The two took a bit of a road trip in the morning towards a small village where a natural spring provided fresh water, which they could bottle up and take home with them. This was the type of natural foraging activity that Emily loved. Back in Westerville, the couple headed to Uptown where shops, restaurants, and bars provided an evening out drinking and chatting. They bar hopped, but they did not stay out late. It was an enjoyable evening, Matt said. They had both been in good spirits. This made the events of the next day even more confusing. Awake by maybe 10 a.m., Matt had no idea where his wife was. They had plans to have a picnic with an old friend of Emily's, but he didn't know any of the details surrounding the plans that she had made, and she wasn't around to clarify. Just before 6 p.m., he called one of Emily's best friends, Celeste. Had she heard from Emily that day? She had not. Celeste told Matt to contact the police. The next call Matt made was to 911.
My wife, Alan Noble, has been missing all day. Her birth is here, with her ID, her car is here with her car keys, and her phone's here. I don't know what you always, I've been advised to call you. It's very, very uncharacteristic for her. No, we had a great day yesterday. It was just a day, and wow. I got up this morning and she wasn't there, which is not abnormal. But I mean, she usually comes home or just, goes for walks. It's very, very unusual for her to not be contact with me. Her phone was here. She always has her phone with her.
Okay. We have an officer headed to talk to you or give you a call to see how we want to proceed with this, okay?
Okay.
Celeste approached the house just as Sergeant Robert Hollis arrived.
Okay, so what's going on?
She's uncharacteristically missing.
Okay.
Her wallet's here. She carries her wallet, ID's in it, some money. Her phone's here. Car's in the garage.
Matt explained that he had gotten out of bed in the night at an undetermined time, maybe about midnight, to use the restroom. But instead of returning to bed with his wife, his habit was to go back to sleep in Joey's old room so that he would not disturb Emily when returning to bed. Then when he awoke sometime around 10 a.m., Emily was gone.
Did you call her?
I called. She's her best friend, and I just called her like now. I mean, I've been waiting around all day for her to show up. I called her. We were supposed to be at a party today.
What time was that?
Maybe something like that.
What time was the picnic supposed to start?
She didn't tell me. It was a way if we could get some time. She didn't tell me when it was going to start. I was just waiting for her to tell me when we should go. I texted her twice and said, hey, we want to party. She didn't get back to me. So
Okay.
I called that guy and I said, she
What guy?
The guy that's at the party.
Okay, is this a friend? Do you know this guy?
I don't know. It's an old friend of hers that she just connected with on Facebook. He invited her to a Memorial Day party.
Okay.
So I texted him and said he hadn't seen her all that.
Matt offered to Sergeant Hollis that Emily often took walks to forage and that the regular trails that she frequented nearby would be a logical place to look for her.
She forages, she goes for walks, and she picks wild edibles. That's kind of her hobby. She goes around here. It's a real short walk. It's 15 minutes the most. A lot of the time I was like, she's just out in that. But
Is that something you guys do together?
sometimes
So you would know where we could look if we need to go that way?
but I mean, yeah, it's public, it's on a bike trail. I mean, I don't know why she would stop. I just got a feeling right here. When my son died, same thing. It's a great fucking year. It's awful. This is so funny. I'm dying. I'm afraid something happens. This is not normal. Yeah, this is here.
Over 2 hours, Matt walked Sergeant Hollis through his house, examining both vehicles and reviewed his recollection of the night before and that morning numerous times. More than once, Matt noted that he had a bad feeling and that he was thinking that it was possible the worst had already happened. It is really disturbing, Matt said, that a person so methodical, thoughtful, and organized as Emily would behave so unpredictably.
Squarest person I've ever met. She does everything. She's taught me a lot since I've been with her. She's really meticulous. She's just, this is uncharacteristic. She would never go somewhere and not tell you where she's going. Ever. It's just who you know. I mean, I lasted as long as I could today. Just been like, she's going to show up, whatever. She's foraging, she went for a walk, she took a trip. Car's here, maybe someone picked her up, which I don't think it ever happened. I've never had it.
Well, she would have taken her phone. I mean, that's really unusual. And she would have told you that she's going to work.
He pointed to one item in particular that stood out to him as out of place in the house. A large extension cord placed on top of the cooler in the garage. The same cooler that the couple had brought with them on the trip to the spring the day before. How did the cord come to rest on top of the cooler after they came home? And what did that mean?
I don't know, man. It's just weird that it's here. And I don't know if there was more than one thing out here. Why is this here?
And her mom passed away and out of a car crash, correct? Okay.
I don't. All I know, this is. We went to that spring and filled up all of this. The spring water.
That's the spring water.
I got home.
Your phone rang.
I just brought it home and put it there. Let's get things wrong. I don't know. But I'm telling you, I'm positive this was here and it wasn't there.
Because you guys put the thing there.
Here yesterday, I collected 3 bottles, I put them in the fridge to keep them cold, we kept the rest out here, and that's all. Maybe at some point she took it and put it there for some weird reason, maybe, but I'm just telling you that this was not. She wouldn't do that because she puts everything right back to where it's supposed to be. Everything here is just the thought. This being here is weird. She wouldn't even like that. I didn't know where to put it, so I just put it here.
In the days that followed, missing person posters were printed and distributed, and more formal search parties were organized. The police employed the use of drones, helicopters, divers, and eventually cadaver dogs to comb through the surrounding area. The investigation was not restricted to the outdoors. Matthew and Emily's condo was searched extensively. Forensic teams from the Ohio Criminal Investigations Bureau were called in to assess the condo. They found no signs of foul play in the home. Security footage from the restaurant and the bars confirmed Matt's version of events up to that point. They were seen leaving the last bar at around 7:30 p.m. The clothing that both had worn out was located in a laundry bin in the condo's bathroom, still unwashed, which again confirmed that they had in fact come home that night and left in question what Emily may have been wearing when she exited the condo. Police asked for help from the public.
And then one resident in the area who puts her back at home 7 to 8 p.m. range on Sunday the 24th of May. I think the nature of this disappearance is suspicious because how many people up and vanish, leaving everything behind like that. Now, that said, we've had another recent case where a young lady did exactly that.
As the search for Emily continued, many in her close circle of friends grew more and more suspicious of Matt. After the first few days, he was not contributing towards their efforts to find her, they said, and he refused to join foot searches. Matt did contact a popular true crime podcast, the Vanished podcast, to bring greater exposure to the search, but this effort did nothing to dispel suspicions towards him. The description that he offered of his very petite wife on the show struck many as extremely odd and off-putting. His comments brought exposure to the case, but also to himself.
We asked him if he could describe Emily to us. This is what he said.
I never saw her get on a scale. She's very small. She's like 100 pounds. Great legs, great arms.
Matt also unhelpfully suggested more than one somewhat bizarre theory to account for Emily's disappearance. Perhaps she had run off with Amish people, or she had been secretly kidnapped. Friends began to speak openly about their distaste for Matt, which had been brewing, it seems, for some time. The perception was that he abandoned Emily early in their relationship when he had moved back to Las Vegas to care for his son, leaving her heartbroken. From this point onwards, he was not well liked. He was characterized as possessive and demeaning towards his wife by her friends, and it was suggested that he had slowly, but purposefully, isolated her from them. Emily's friends were not the only ones harboring doubts about Matt and his story. Detectives with the Westerville police were thinking that things did not add up. Matt was brought in for a voluntary interview 2 days following the missing person report. Straight out of the gate, he told the detectives that he didn't do it, a statement that in fact had the opposite of the intended impact on the investigators. His wife was missing, so what was it that he didn't do? He also continually referred to Emily in the past tense throughout the interview. He was asked again to provide the timeline of events leading to the last time he saw Emily.
No, I've gone through this in my head with the timeline, and some of my times don't line up I made a phone call when I thought I was sleeping.
Okay.
So, I try my best, but I don't want to make anything false.
You're human, right?
Yeah, I'm human.
And all I want is your best.
It might be, specific times I couldn't really be like, this is when I did this, this is when I did that. I could if I had my phone, sort of.
Just the best that you can. And I want to make sure that sequentially I understand.
Could you help me write it? Because I can't spell for one, I'm pretty horrible. Or just kind of help me.
Well, if you need help with the word, I can help you spell it, absolutely. And I'm not here to judge stuff.
Matt's faltering memory was one of many factors concerning to investigators. They also believed that he may have had a motive to hurt his wife. He had initially framed their marriage as a happy one, but text messages pulled from Emily's phone suggested a different story. Matthew was at best misrepresenting the state of his relationship. At worst, he was outright lying about a marriage that was crumbling over disagreements that had become quite heated.
At the same time, she said, I think Matt is mentally ill. And then the same day, we aren't talking. Reference your relationship, we're not talking. This was a month ago, she said we're not talking. And she said, I don't want to talk about him, I'd rather focus on the future. By the way, Matt got really drunk last night. This was February. By the way, Matt got really drunk last night and said some things I don't think he can take back. I'm fine. I'm pretty sure we are not going to stay together. What do you think?
I mean, we would argue about things, but I didn't think that it was that.
What was it that you said? She was mad that you couldn't.
And she focused on one thing, Matt picked the fight. Again, this is April. This is barely a month ago.
You would accuse me of picking fights.
Okay, but this was a month ago. Okay, this is heavy. Matt picked a fight with me yesterday and said some awful things. I'm not wearing my wedding ring. And that doesn't sound like somebody who's in a happy relationship. I thought my wife texted that to somebody a month ago.
I get it. I'm not going to say that those things, of course, there was a roller coaster relationship, but it wasn't like anything that you would think that someone would hurt someone. It just would.
I'm just addressing the fact that you just told me that the last 6 months have been bliss and renee.
Yes.
Okay.
There have been levels of that. Okay. And you can check the other texts, and they are super, I love you, I'm going to say.
I saw that. It's very much up and down, bipolar relationship.
That would go away. That would really go away. It would last for a night.
Will you acknowledge that that's some pretty heavy shit when your wife said, I took up my wedding ring, I don't think we're going to stay together.
It's not as heavy as you think it is.
In mid-September, nearly 4 months after Emily had gone missing, 2 hikers who were part of a search party discovered a body in a wooded area not far from the bike paths that Emily loved to walk. Police reported at the time that the area had been previously searched on no less than 3 separate occasions, at least once with cadaver dogs, and somehow nothing was found. It was later revealed that the paths nearby had been combed and cadaver dogs had walked along the wood line, but the area itself had not actually been entered to search. Dental records suggested that it was Emily that had been found, but due to the time that had passed, full DNA testing was required to be certain.
WPD is going to continue to conduct our investigation to try to figure out how the body got in the location of the dead on County Line Road. There's still a lot of work to be done. We do not have an autopsy report yet to actually even give us the cause of death.
A few weeks later, DNA testing confirmed that the remains were those of Emily Noble. She had been found hanged. It was an apparent suicide. It appeared that she had brought a plastic USB cord with her to the woods for this purpose. A water bottle was found laying next to her on the ground. It had been filled with alcohol. Her vape pen had fallen from her hand to her left-hand side on the ground. Emily had been left-handed. To those who knew Emily, her death felt eerily similar to, and maybe even symbolic of, one from only 10 months earlier. Emily's 18-year-old stepson, Joey, had died in the woods and in the same manner. Emily was no stranger to loss. Her first marriage had ended when her husband Mark, a musician who had battled with depression, had ended his own life. His actions had come as a complete shock to her. Roughly 3 years later, Emily would lose her mother in a fatal car accident, followed by her father to illness, both within the span of 12 months. The first autopsy report performed by the Montgomery County coroner determined only that Emily had died from multiple injuries of the head and neck. The formal cause of death was not determined. Law enforcement took these basic findings and began to dig deeper.
We asked for the help of the Ohio State University Skeletal Biology Research Lab. They provided a thorough report of their findings that included multiple facial fractures and multiple neck fractures that Emily suffered. We then provided our entire case file, the OSU report, and all the information that we were able to gather on this case to a strangulation expert. His findings were very clear. He said that this was clearly a homicide based on the injuries that were sustained and the mechanism of those injuries. He also gave his opinion that her body was staged to appear as though it was a suicide, and in his opinion, that was absolutely not the case.
It was the theory of the Westerville police that Matt had returned home with Emily on the night of her birthday, sometime shortly before 8 p.m. as he had claimed. But then they said sometime between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m., he had killed her. The scene in the woods just off a path, the one that he had been directing them towards, must have been staged. Their expert claimed that there was no way that Emily had sustained the injuries to her neck from the USB cord. Almost as soon as Matt had finished with the attempted cover-up, police said, he then tried to curate the image of a worried husband. He called her best friend. He texted and called family members. He spoke extensively with police. Matthew Moore was arrested during a traffic stop in late September. The previous day, he had been indicted by a Delaware County grand jury on 2 distinct counts of murder and 1 of felonious assault.
Your head! Do not move! Yes, sir.
Stick both your hands out this way, Matt. Both of them straight.
Seatbelts on, seatbelts on. That's just listen to what you're being told.
All right. Take that, undo your...
There's no way this is a mistake, like Matt wanted to say. We knew he did this from the beginning, his family, or our family and friends. We just bit our tongue and let the officers do what they needed to do. And we knew this was going to be the outcome, that he was going to be arrested. And hopefully it will follow through and he will serve time in jail, hopefully a lifetime.
In a pretrial hearing in June 2021, prosecutors told the court that Emily had been severely beaten before her death and had sustained multiple injuries to her neck. The actual nature of her injuries would be later disputed at trial, but in the meantime, Matt was held on a $2.5 million bond. His trial commenced in August 2022. Immediately following the swearing in of the jury, all members were taken on a trip to the exact location where Emily had been found. The walk took them roughly 10 feet from a very busy road, across a bike path and into some dense woodland. To reach one side of the foraging area to the other required crouching or even crawling under and between various plants, shrubs, trees, and underbrush. The location raised questions about the plausibility of the murder. Could Matt have carried Emily to this location in order to stage the scene? Was that reasonable? The state's case hinged upon the testimony of the medical expert Dr. Bill Smock, who found that Emily's death was the result of a homicide. They also presented texts showing that Emily had been making future plans. She had been in contact with her dentist for a cleaning, for instance. Were these the actions of someone who was planning to no longer be around? The prosecution also highlighted the inconsistencies in Matt's statements, times where they believe he was caught in a lie and attempting to cover his actions. Phone records showed him texting friends between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. on the night of the alleged murder. Then around noon, he used an app on his phone to try to locate Emily's phone, which was in the other room of the home. In a 800 square foot condo, Matt chose to use an app instead of getting out of bed and just looking for her. Dr. Smock conducted his forensic analysis using reports from the coroner, anthropologist, and crime scene photos. The doctor testified that the crime scene was staged and that Emily Noble died of manual strangulation. There were 4 fractures on her neck identified, as well as breakage to her nose. According to Dr. Smock, the nature of the damage to her neck could not have been caused by the hanging. It was simply unheard of, which meant the way she was found did not reflect the way she had died.
Reviewing those crime scenes, you consider the totality of all of the evidence.
That is correct.
And what additional factors besides the ligature, besides the 4 fractures in the neck, besides her age and weight, did you consider?
I considered the nature of the scene. I considered the fact that she had an additional fracture of her nose, at the edge of her nose. That the injuries that she sustained were not from a ligature. The type of injuries that Emily has in her neck, the 4 here, are the type of injuries that you see with manual strangulation, not with a ligature. Doesn't exist in the medical literature. Never a reported case anywhere. Looking at that medical literature of thousands, more than 1,000 cases studied by forensic pathologists around the world, in women less than 110 pounds, it doesn't exist in an incomplete kneeling position. That's the totality of the evidence.
In rebuttal, the defense called Dr. Heather Garvin, professor of anatomy at the Des Moines Medical University. Her findings suggested that hanging should not be ruled out as a possible cause of death. Dr. Garvin pointed to a study that showed that up to 10% of hanging cases showed the same bilateral neck fractures that Dr. Smock claimed could not have been caused in this manner.
Back to a statement that Dr. Smock made under oath when he testified that there is absolutely no literature supporting that a 100-pound woman could have the 4 fractures and from a hanging. What, if any, opinion do you have with respect to that statement?
Well, it's obvious that there is at least one article, if not more, indicating that this fracture pattern can occur with hanging. While it may not specifically have a 100-pound, 52-year-old woman, there's lots of things regarding the scenario. And I mean, there's ligatures, there's health, there's bone density, there's a lot of different factors that go in. I would not be comfortable saying that this could not happen, given that it does.
Even the timing of the murder was brought into question. The state's theory that Matt had committed the murder overnight and staged the scene before returning home in the morning was supported, they said, by the flashlight that was left sitting out next to the orange extension cord in the garage. According to the state, Matt had cleverly drawn attention to the placement of the cord, but he had erred in also leaving out in plain view the very tool that had enabled him to stage the supposed murder in the darkness. But there was evidence that Emily was still alive on the morning of the 25th. John Kramer, the couple's former neighbor from directly across the street, told Sergeant Hollis that he saw Emily leave for a walk at around 9 to 10 a.m. on the day she was reported missing. They had a brief exchange of pleasantries. She seemed fine, he said. At least that was the statement John Kramer provided to Sergeant Hollis on the day that he responded to Matt's 911 call. This information was received later that day by Matt with some relief. It meant that Emily could be just fine. She had just left for a walk that morning. But John later retracted his statement. At trial, he claimed that due to his age, he may have been confused. Perhaps it was the day before that he had seen Emily, he suggested. The only problem is that Emily's cell phone records placed her an hour-and-a-half drive away from her home at 9:30 a.m. on the day before. The exchange that John and Emily had, therefore, was almost certainly, as he had originally stated, on the morning of her disappearance. In closing arguments, the prosecution summarized the facts as they presented them. The death was a homicide. Evidence that may appear to clear him, like text messages and the body cam footage, in fact only showed Matt's clever attempts to cover up the crime.
This is a staged suicide scene. Who on planet Earth would have an incentive to stage a suicide other than the defendant? random, unknown suspect, the Westerville Strangler, who's manually strangling women in the woods, wouldn't take the time, the effort, the care to stage a suicide, what would be the point? And I was laying in bed, and instead of getting off the couch and talking to my wife about our plans for the day, I texted her, are we going to this party or what? In an 800 square foot condo? Hey, are we going to this party or what? And then what's he do? Hits that Find My iPhone app, right? Because that'll give you, look, now when I pull out my phone records, if anybody ever looks at it, see, I sent her this text. I didn't know where she was, and I did Find My iPhone. At the end, Officer Hollis and the defendant are standing out in the driveway. And he says, maybe I'm crazy, but you just got to come look at this. He leads him right there. He wants Officer Hollis to see it. That look, here's this orange cord. My wife must have been looking for something to hang herself.
The defense questioned whether phone data indicated anything more than the ups and downs of a regular marriage. There was no hatred expressed, nothing terribly harsh or abusive. These messages did not constitute a motive. There was no motive. There was, however, evidence of Emily's poor mental state in the months before her death.
24 years, over 150 jury trials. I've never had a harder closing argument than this. Because honestly, in most, I've got evidence to attack. This case is totally speculation. Matt doesn't go into the woods and search for her, and so that inference should lead you to the fact that he didn't want to find her, and that should lead you to the fact that he killed her. And this is common sense of relationships end in divorce. And those that stay together, well, I submit that some of them shouldn't, and those that do probably argue every once in a while. Here's my point. When you look through these text messages with respect to divorce or not wanting to be together or those kind of things, the only time divorce is mentioned is when Matt says, if you want to divorce me, leave me. Just tell me. Never in here, and you heard me ask the detective, does he say, I hate you, I want you dead, I'm going to kill you, I will hurt you? Nothing. Please read them. Because the truth is, and you'll see in the counseling records, that Emily had a history of depression and anxiety, that she had struggled with prior loss and trauma. Look through the records and see how many times you see the word trauma and loss and grief and sadness.
Defense counsel Diane Menashe further questioned the state's theory of the crime, including the last-minute shift made in the state's closing argument that the murder actually took place in the woods and not in the house as they had initially submitted. Furthermore, Menashe argued that Matthew Moore was simply not the criminal mastermind that he would have needed to be to pull this off. Menashe compared her client to a child, not a criminal genius.
They come home from the bar. Emily changes to get ready for her walk because she's wearing her walking clothes. And then Matt follows her for an unknown reason. And we don't know if he's, according to the state's theory, changed his clothes or not, but we certainly know what he was wearing at the bar. They have that shirt. No burrs, no scratches, no rips, no blood. Remember that question about might you have a fracture in the nose if you have blood from a fracture in the nose? Nothing. And the shirt from the criminal mastermind is in the hamper. The hamper, and still not washed. Let's talk lastly about Matt Moore. We heard a lot, I guess, the usual suspects. He's a mastermind. He's the same guy, and we're all, if we're not parents, we're siblings and we're children. And he's the same guy that's writing out a statement and asks how you spell the word couch. He asks how you spell memorial. And Matt, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but he's the same guy that reads while he's writing. When he's writing, he's reading what he's writing. And we all know, as people that have been around children, what that means. It's this same man, though, that would be able to stage a scene figure out to put the alcohol in the water bottle, put the vape pen next to her because she's left-hand dominant, would tie her shoes so tight that they wouldn't come off. We know that the branch is taller than 6'3", 6'4". We know that. The cord is slung over the branch. It's not knotted at the top. And if you're going to actually stage a suicide and hang someone from a branch and you're 6 feet tall and the branch is like right here, you knot it to make sure it stays up, don't you? Look at that. She flung it over.
The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning their verdict.
Verdict on count 1. We, the jury, being duly impaneled and sworn, find the defendant Matthew L. Moore not guilty of murder as he stands charged in count 1 of the indictment dated the 26th of August 2022, signed by all 12 members of the panel. Verdict on count 2. We, the jury, being duly impaneled and sworn, find the defendant Matthew L. Moore not guilty of murder as he stands charged in count 2 of the indictment dated 26 August 2022 and signed in ink by all 12 members of the panel. I think from day one, everyone's wanted justice for your wife, Emily. And I've heard that phrase a lot, and I think everyone truly desires that. But I think the jury has also said, justice for Emily is not injustice for you. And they reaffirmed that.
Jurors later told the press that not one of them had pushed for a guilty verdict in their discussion. The body cam footage shown to them on the first day of the trial set the tone. No one believed that Matthew Moore was putting on a show, and the prosecution never gave them a reason to doubt that. Some of the jury questioned whether the death was a homicide at all, while others believed it was, but regardless, there was nothing that proved Matthew Moore had anything to do with it.